Okay, sorry for that mix-up, everybody, but if we're good to go, we can get started on this. How long do we have, by the way?
Well, I told everyone 1 to 3, so
1 to 3.
as long as you need.
Okay, it'll probably shorter than that, but. Okay, awesome. So my name is Ronan. This is Deborah Hendrix from the Sam Proctor Oral History Program. I've been on campus since 1967 and collecting interviews from around Florida and now the country and now the world. So thanks to y'all. So I think this is a very cool collaboration. I listened to some of the interviews, I think, from last year, and seems like a really exciting way to engage in oral history while doing the kind of trip that you all are. So. Has anyone ever done interviewing in an academic capacity as sociology or anthropology, journalism? Anybody? As a journalism thing?
This was back in high school. It wasn't at any college, but I just had my family's connections NASA and all that.
Oh, cool.
So interviewing someone for that kind of area.
Yeah, just about their work. Okay, cool. So, I mean, the principles are pretty simple across the board. I'll sort of go back to that in a second. So, like I said, my name is Ronan Hart. I started with the oral history program back in 2021 when I was an undergrad as a volunteer on the Mississippi Freedom Project trip, which was a research trip in the Mississippi Delta. And after that, I was hired as a part-time student assistant, essentially. And then while I finished my master's in history at UF, I came back for the Underground Railroad Oral History Project, which is a partnership with the National Park Service and their Network to Freedom Division, which is about commemorating the Underground Railroad specifically. So it's doing interviews with people who are the descendants of Underground Railroad involved people. So when I'm not doing that, I'm doing things like this and meeting you all and talking about oral history. So has anyone heard of oral history prior to this or had any experience with it? Yeah?
Yeah, just heard of it.
All right.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
I saw it on the paper.
Yeah. So, would be in the iguana? No, okay.
Oh no, sorry. It was it was a paper for this. Actually, but now that you mention it, I actually did see something about it in the iguana.
Yeah. We've had a thing with iguana for a long time, although they'll print transcripts from interviews that we've done in the past with notable people. So when you're talking about oral history, you can be talking about the research method, the recording that you get itself, or a transcript of that recording. Transcript is optional, but can be helpful for research purposes. Oral history can be kind of distinguished from other interview methodologies in anthropology or sociology or journalism through a couple things. Some of them are the in-depth kind of content that you can talk to someone for a very, very long time. You don't have to. You can go from the earliest memories that they have to the present moment, and you can talk about that kind of very broad swath, but you can also focus in on the smallest moments and just little sensory memories about growing up or particular moments. So you get the big and the little through doing oral history. And it's all about what people remember. And that's kind of a difference against something like maybe journalism, which is very concerned with strict factual stuff. Obviously, you hope someone is telling the truth the best that they're able, but it is still always based on what they remember. And that's kind of what we're interested in, is how people remember and interpret experiences from their lives. Dr. Ortiz, who was the director of the oral history program from 2008 to 2023, has left us with a lot of advice, and I'll hand out one of his worksheets. But of that, be flexible. You might go in with your list of questions that you want to ask someone, but be ready to, they throw you a curveball, you have to keep up and ask good follow-up questions, delay an interview if you have to delay it, do a second part or a follow-up, or do it walking around or in a location that you don't expect. But oral history is often about anticipating the unexpected to the best of your ability. Be aware of your own personal biases when you're talking to someone. I think looking over your emails, Glenn, talking to anti-nuclear activists, that was 1 or 2 people. So, people talking about political beliefs and kind of campaigns and movements that they've been a part of, whatever your feelings about nuclear power are, you don't want to let your own feelings kind of get in the way of the conversation that you're having. And just hearing someone and kind of allowing them to be comfortable and kind of sharing their thoughts. But that doesn't mean, not having them interrogate those thoughts if that's what you're interested in, and still like asking questions or being like, oh, maybe some people might disagree with that. How do you understand that? Or how, did you ever encounter someone who disagreed with you? Those kinds of questions. So that, do you have a question?
Yeah, well, I would like to ask something, because something came up last year during a conversation, and it's not so much that the person's values or beliefs didn't align. It was like if somebody says something that's almost universally like not acceptable, like would you address that in the interview? Would you ask them why they said that, or how's that, or would you just kind of ignore it and move on to the do you know what I mean? Does that then become part of the interview, or is it just
I mean,
out there?
Unless you or them really want to edit it out, it's in the interview. I think it comes down to what you want to talk about and what you want to get out of that interview. So if you're talking about racism and race relations and they say something racist, you can talk about that. If they just throw in like a stray racist remark that's nothing to do with the conversation, I think it would be appropriate to kind of move on and not say anything. But people are going to say what they want to say, but it is still your interview in the sense that you're trying to get something out of it. And you don't have all the control in that, but you can leave stuff if you don't want to talk about something. And that can mean, accepting some discomfort around someone saying something that makes you uncomfortable, but that's just a reality of being in the world and talking to people who are different from you. So it's something to expect or anticipate. Building trust. What kind of contact have Glenn, you or anyone else been in with the people that you're going to be interviewing?
So they have all been contacted. They've all agreed to do this. They've all have good enough English to have a conversation in an hour in English. So that part, and then I've given them a timeline and I think the name of their students. They're going to work with them and just confirm they're going to be available. And I've let them know that we'll contact them again when we get to Salzburg. Set up an intro meeting to have coffee, just to get to know them and get like those formalities out of the way, just so you feel more comfortable during the interview, right? And I told them we'd also talk about the project and whether there's any issues that they particularly do or don't want to talk about during the interview, and then we'll set up the interview at that first meeting. So that's perfect. That's exactly what I was going to suggest, basically, that you don't want the interview to be the first time that you're meeting or talking to someone. So something like just getting coffee first is great, and when you let someone get more comfortable with you, they're going to be more willing to kind of open up to talk about their life. So that's solid. You go in with, hopefully you all do some research and have some questions ahead of time, but keep your questions open-ended and let the conversation go where it will. It's not like you're quizzing or interrogating people, you're just having a conversation. Have good follow-ups and keep it open-ended, and don't worry about constructing the perfect question that brings everything together, because that's not always the best approach. The oral history interview is an intense and personal search to learn something about the history of human striving and endurance. The success of the interview depends to a great degree on the amount of trust and understanding the interview is able to create with the narrator. Courtesy and empathy are part of this process. I think the point of having these quotes is kind of underline that someone is trusting you with their story, and that can be a lot of trust. For everyone, it's a lot of trust, but depending on what they're telling you about and what about their life they're sharing. So it's important to have the courtesy and empathy and respect for the person who's sharing that stuff with you, because it might be something crazy about their life that you've never gone through that you couldn't understand. Yeah.
And it might be touched on later, but as far as Are interviews or these interviews in general, are any parts ever cut? Or is it supposed to be like the original uncut version is like what the definition of oral history is? Or are we allowed to like cut it?
Yeah, I'll talk about this a little bit later, but if they request anything be removed, then like it should be removed. I think aside from that, it's good to keep the interview in one piece to like put out there as like a document in and of itself. But if you want to take it and like make like a podcast or like a video thing using parts of it, that's awesome. But that's like a separate product.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. Deborah's advice from the past is that oral history is a collaborative creation. You know, it's not you taking something from someone or putting them under a microscope to study them, but it's something that you're building with someone and you are learning from them, learning about their life, because everyone is the expert about their own life. Allow yourself to be taught. So I think you all are pretty far on this flow chart already, but key to an oral history project is kind of deciding what you want to get out of it, why you want to conduct it, your kind of motivations or your funding or your purposes, if this relates to some kind of thesis or study project or is just something you're interested in doing. And it's good to clarify those things so that you can explain them to the narrator, because they might be like, why are you talking to me? Why do you care about my life or what I think or what's going to happen with this? So it's good to clarify things like this just so you can answer these questions and you can tell someone why you want to talk to them and you can tell them where the interview is going to go and who's going to be able to see it, and we'll talk about that a bit later. And just know enough about the process to be able to answer questions like that. And we'll get to equipment. Background research is important. I don't know where you guys are at with that in the midst of doing finals. I don't want to say like hit the books or anything, but that's just another way to show respect for someone, is to like do the research that you can do. So like when they talk about the anti-nuclear movement, maybe makes certain references to particular treaties or protocols from different points in history. It's good to just like know what they're talking about and just have a sense for it. You know, you don't need to be an expert and you don't need to like explain stuff to them to show that you know, but just like show that you have the light of recognition in their eyes when they're talking. Other just bits of advice, eye contact, kind of lean in, show that you're paying attention. Seems obvious, but it's still good advice. It's helpful to take notes, especially like if you think of a question while someone is talking, you can write it down and then wait for them to finish before you ask the question. It's also good to tell someone why you're writing, because that can be kind of intimidating when someone is like staring at you and it feels like they're writing down everything that you're saying. So you can explain that. That tends to put people more at ease. And try and avoid like talking over or interrupting or finishing someone's sentences. Even when someone pauses, it doesn't always mean they're done talking. So you want to like create some space before you hit them with the next question. Just kind of make sure they're fine. You know, if this is something you're new to or you're kind of nervous, it's easy to like want to go really quickly and like get all your questions out. And it's better to just kind of relax and let it breathe and let them, you know, not feel hurried. Open-ended questions, like I said. Yes, so if you do your research, someone might refer to something that you know about or have heard of, but you have to think that someone listening to this in the future that might not know what that is, won't know what it is. So it's still worth having someone explain what they're referring to or what the significance of something is. Even if you know, that can just be a good practice. And refrain from adding your own experience, which I get that urge to do because I can get very excited when I'm talking to someone about history or whatever. But that's better done before the interview or after the interview. That's where you can kind of talk about yourself a little bit more. I feel like you guys kind of have a lot of this done if you have your people figured out. So everyone knows who they're going to talk to, that part's assigned. Has anyone done any research or kind of looked into them a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to share what you're curious to learn from them or what you'd want to ask them about?
Mine is Jean-Marie Courier,
Yes.
is his name. He does a lot of like development, like help from like, like he focuses a lot on like the disparity between like the global north and like the global south and like how we can like kind of help manage that and like bring about change on like more of like a local scale, so like just Austria. There's not a lot about him online, so I think something I would be really curious to get to know, like in our first meetup and or during the interview, is like what during a young age or like his developmental stage, like was there like some like watershed experience, or like was it just like, you know, like the just like news he had seen on TV or whatnot that like compelled him to like go down such like a path of like economic integration between the North and South?
Yeah.
Because it's very interesting, but you know, it's not on a lot of people's minds, so.
Yeah. So that personal piece is kind of missing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are good questions, but also be prepared for him to not want to answer them.
Yeah.
You know, if that information isn't out there, maybe it's because he doesn't want it to be. But that's why it's still very valuable to ask, because this might be his chance to explain that. So, yeah.
He's like a journalist, so he's worked at like different, Michael Meyer, and he's like a journalist and he's worked at different papers and he's like taken a lot of newspapers like into the digital space, which I'm not saying like this is just like, he's born in like 58, so he's kind of like older, so I'm kind of like wondering like how he's like jumped into that digital space when many wouldn't in a way. So how that's gone, he's like been a leader in a lot of papers getting off the ground, so like what has he done to do that?
Yeah, that's great. Did you have one also?
I've had Max.
We have
Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay, awesome. Yeah, that sounds exciting.
Can you maybe address, or maybe you're gonna do this later, last year we had one student with each narrator. This year there's a few narrators with 2 students. So how that works in the interview, do they bounce off each other, take turns asking questions? What's the best practices in that situation?
Yeah, good question. You do want to choose someone to kind of lead, and in that they do the first introduction and ask someone to spell their name. That can be important and helpful to have on the record, and just have that first question about maybe them growing up. But after that, absolutely bounce it back and forth. You can kind of agree to divvy up questions if you want to make it even, or one person says more, one person says less. I really prefer to have a second interviewer, because it can be pretty tiring to like be locked in on someone and really be listening to every word that they say. That can be tiring. So I think that's good to have 2 people. The more people that you get, it can get kind of intimidating if someone has like a camera or recorder in your face and feels like a job interview or something, but I don't think 2 is like that necessarily. So, but just be thinking about that and be thinking about how to keep someone comfortable. Yeah, you guys are pretty far into this, but just be thinking of different kind of facets of who you're going to be talking to, and you know, the gentleman who's working in like global development, maybe think about what was going on in his country, Austria or wherever else, when he was like in college or something. Were there a lot of like protests going on that he would have been involved in, or you know, what was kind of the milieu that was going on? So it's easy to focus on just like one aspect of someone's background, but you can kind of think historically, politically, culturally, economically, things like that. And you're never going to be able to look up everything, so that's not really something to get too caught up on. Yeah, I said most of this. Do try and have a question guide, especially for like, if you get stumped and you just have no idea what to say, it's helpful to have just a piece of paper you can look down and there's another question ready to go. Yeah, like I said, kind of help explain the process to people, and we'll talk about where the interview goes in a minute. So have a good sense of that so you can explain it and keep them comfortable. Eye contact, follow-up questions. Don't impose your opinion, stay non-judgmental, make room for silences that people are expressing, but be ready to ask a question if you think they're really done talking. And maintain the trust that someone is putting in you. the kind of ethical questions around not taking, but being given this, given someone's story and having that trust in you. Remember that it's significant to them, and for you, it's like maybe one summer abroad little project that you're doing, but it's someone's whole life, so it's good to keep that in mind. Speak naturally is kind of different if they're not talking in their language that they're raised speaking in, but just encourage them to try and be comfortable to the extent that they can be, even if they're being forced to speak English. The best that you can do. Avoid debating or arguing specific points, but that doesn't mean like not asking them to clarify or kind of explain what they're saying more. Open-ended questions and making room for silence. The kind of rights that your narrator maintains is to ask any questions about the procedure leading up to it or what happens after. The Creative Commons agreement, which I will now, I think we have enough for, you can take one and pass around. So this is our Creative Commons agreement. Is this what you've used for last trip? Do you remember, Glenn?
It was the deed of gift?
Yeah, okay.
Is that the same,
Yeah, it's different. Yeah. They're slightly different, but now we use the Creative Commons for the last few years. Okay, yeah. Oh, are we short?
Did I use the wrong one last year?
We accidentally call it deed of gift.
Oh.
So that literally gives the rights to the university, but we don't do that.
Yeah, sorry. I'll send a PDF so you guys can have more. Sorry, I didn't bring enough down.
Here.
Oh, do you think you have more in your?
See if I got it.
Okay.
Just need one more, I think.
Yeah, one more would be great. So essentially, through this form, this is our way of avoiding the IRB, the Institutional Review Board, which can be like a long and lengthy process, but what it says is that when your narrator signs this, the interview is going into the Creative Commons, which means that anyone can access it, anyone can use it or modify it for like creative purposes, but it can't be monetized without the permission of the narrator, which would be a separate agreement. So if you want to put this interview in a book or a movie or a documentary that's like a for-profit enterprise, you would have to reach back out to the narrator and try and get that figured out. But according to this,
You mean us? Or you mean the...
whoever wants to do that. So I mean,
If we want to do our own thing with the interview, then we're allowed to do that?
yeah, as long as it's not like a monetized project, yeah. So if you want to cut it into like a documentary or something, or for a class project or anything like for free or for educational purposes, that's totally fine. But it just changes when it comes down to making money, because that's where the narrator maintains kind of a stake.
And be prepared to explain that
Yeah.
to the narrator, because you have to really explain that a couple of times.
Yeah. So just make sure they know that part, and you can read it and get kind of familiar with it. It's a lot easier than other ways of doing this, and make sure you have them sign. It's very easy to like forget when you're in and you're out, or you're in a hurry or something. But it can be very difficult to get back in touch with someone and try and get another version of the form afterwards. So when they do you return these interviews to us with the signed Creative Commons form, we can put it in the SPOHP archive, which is part of the UF Libraries archive, and that's when it becomes publicly available and anyone can listen to it. And I'll get back to the archives shortly if anyone's curious about that. If you can, try and give the narrator a copy of the audio, or send them just the link on YouTube. Most of these go up on YouTube.
Unfortunately, audio is a little different. We
Yeah.
don't really put it on YouTube because
Okay,
it's
yeah.
video. But we can email it sometimes. It's just hard to deal with audio, but so it's going to bypass the YouTube and go straight to the UFDC. But we will definitely try to get it to them somehow.
Yeah. If all of them were put in like a Google Drive, that would be one maybe easy way, and you can just send people links to the individual interviews so they can go back and listen to it, send it to their grandma or grandchildren or anything like that. Your narrator kind of, they don't have to answer a question if they don't want to. They have that freedom. they can decide they don't want to do the interview, or afterwards they can decide that they don't want the interview to be public, or they want certain things removed, which can be a headache, but we still do respect those requests. Yeah, and they can say like, you can keep the interview, but just like make it non-public. We're seeing that more and more as people asking for that. And especially if someone's involved in, if they're a professor or involved in any kind of political stuff, they might be more careful about what they say or want to take back things later on. So you can remind someone of that before. You really should say beforehand that this is going to be public and anyone can listen to it. So think about what you're going to say before you say it. So it falls to you to make sure that these are of the highest quality possible, including kind of audio quality, the quality of the questions that you're asking, your attentiveness to clarifying names. You know, if they say something, a name or a location that you're not familiar with, you can ask them to spell it or explain where it is, or maybe where it's near. Explain kind of the meaning of some things that they talk about. It's also on you to make sure people are comfortable, explain the procedures of the interview, the goals, the outcomes, where it's going to end up, what their rights are. If you do use this in the future, if you use the interview for a project or something, kind of maintain that you're not misquoting someone or misrepresenting them in the future. It seems obvious, but still worth saying that you want to maintain kind of the fidelity of what someone was saying if you're going to quote them. And preserving and protecting the interview more comes down to us once we get a copy of it. So real quick, if you are curious about how to find interviews from the past or find your interviews once they're posted, which might even still take a few months after your trip, you can go to our website, the SPOHP website, oral.history@UFL. We have a directory. So this is the probably easiest way to find projects, and you can use that menu to sort them by topic, and it has pretty much all of our projects listed. That you cannot listen on our website. If you want to actually listen, you should go to the UF Digital Collections. But the UF Digital Collections is kind of hard to use, so that's why I showed the directory, because that's the easiest way to find what you're looking for. And when you know what you're looking for and you actually want to listen to it, that's when you should refer to the digital collections. It can be difficult frequently, and you can look up the name of a collection or a specific person, and stuff is all posted up there.
Could we get links to, like,
Yeah.
from the digital collection, and if we wanted to on like the UF and Salzburg Study Abroad page, have a link to all the interviews that have been done, we could do that.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
That might be a handy way to kind of group them all in one place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have they been added to the UFDC
I
so
think
far?
so. I think they have.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, so we can, so we were just forced to make an aggregation and then by hand, and then it'll just be a link, and then they'll all be there.
Yep.
That's the best they can do.
Yep.
Yep, I can send you that for sure. That and the Creative Commons. And then we also have our YouTube page, mostly video content, so yours probably will not be posted on here if they're just audio, but still it's a way to see what we do.
Would you recommend maybe in the future that we move to video? Or, I mean, I think there's some advantages and disadvantages either way. I think this is a lower, like, not as intrusive and just more comfortable, just kind of record, especially for first time doing interviews, and it just seems like an easier introduction to it than the video and having to worry about more technical things.
Yeah, I think it does make more sense in your case, especially because you're traveling, you'd have to bring a camera and a stand or lighting stuff with you. So I think
10 times harder.
Yeah.
Really, because now you have the visual aspect, and people, they want to look good.
Mm-hmm.
About the lighting and all that. Or as a recorder, Now you can make a video out of the audio. You can do that. And sometimes they do that if it's like a really long audio. and it's just too cumbersome, I'll go ahead and make a video out of it, which is literally just the audio with a still shot, you know. But it is easily shareable at that point, which is it's really hard for audio, you wouldn't think.
Yeah.
And that reminds me, I think last year, one thing we regretted not doing more of is more pictures with your cell phone. So maybe snap a handful of pictures of the person, just because you could have it in the background, or you could go through the different pictures with the audio there, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's just, because you're never going to go back. You're never going to find that moment again in your whole lifetime. So definitely take some pictures, even though it's like, oh God, I got to take my picture. But you will not regret that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think audio is probably for the best. And this training would be like 2 hours longer or more if we did have to.
All day.
Or a whole day.
You have to train on these. You can't just pick it up and do it. It doesn't do that way.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's pretty much it. Thank you all, and happy to talk about any other questions if anything's left. Yes, and these, I forgot.
Yeah, they also have links on the back.
Yeah, so here's 2 sheets of just some best practices. It's a lot of stuff I said, but it's helpful to refer back to. And these are great to give to your narrator afterwards, so they kind of know who has their interview, how to find it, and it has the same information from the Creative Commons. Yes. Yeah, okay, it might be short again, sorry. I didn't know how many people were coming today. Yeah, they say a lot of the same stuff.
And this stuff, I think, is all on the website.
Yeah.
Proctor website.
Yeah.
I might have even sent you guys the links to some of that stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I've actually seen this exact page online.
Yeah, I think I
I
sent.
saw it like 2 nights ago.
Yeah,
So,
Yeah. Yeah, so that little booklet is helpful to give to someone because you keep the Creative Commons form, they don't keep it, but it has the text from it so they know what they signed if they want to look at it later. Okay.